What's up, everybody? One of the questions I get a lot is, how did this school to prison pipeline come to be? Where did it come from? I'm just now hearing of it, or I never heard of it before. And to give you a brief history, back in the 1950s, law enforcement officers would come into the school, but their purpose was to be more like coaches. And as it evolved, you've heard of things called the Police Boys Club, Police Athletic League, and things like that, where law enforcement officers were coaches and trainers and doing different stuff in the communities as part of community relations. But what happened was in the 1990s, with a concern about violence in schools, they were placing police officers in schools, and to crack down, they started using zero tolerance policies, which took infractions that were dealt with differently. If you're as old as I am, you can remember probably writing on the chalkboard 100 times or detention and things like that, those were no longer come to be. They were being phased out and more harsh policies were taking place. In 1999, after the Columbine shooting, there was more of a law enforcement presence. And what was happening was, and continues to happen, is the law enforcement officers aren't trained in the social emotional learning. They take things from a law enforcement perspective. So things were allowed to be handled by law enforcement rather than the administrators of the schools who were deferring to the law enforcement officers, which took something as simple as throwing Skittles or something into the criminal justice arena, or a fight or things like that, which were handled differently, were now being crimes. And some of those things would not have been crimes if they just happened outside of school. So that's kind of the origin, and this is where we're getting to now, where the role of law enforcement in the schools has increased, and the role of administrators, they have started to rely on law enforcement to control these behaviors. And that's when you hear a lot about defunding the police. It's not about taking police away, but it's using the resources that police are using and putting them in places such as social workers, counselors, and things like that inside the schools, so this pipeline can at least be disrupted, where people who are properly trained in social and emotional learning can be in the schools rather than the law enforcement perspective. So that's where we are now. See you again tomorrow.